Hey, friends of the planet. I'm so delighted to have with us Josh Aviv, who is the founder and the CEO of the portable EV charging company called SparkCharge. So, Josh, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
No problem. Super excited to be here today. I'm really excited to be talking with you.
Yeah, we want to know about all things EV and charging and what this means. So we're really delighted to have an expert with us to fill us in a bit more. And the first question I wanted to ask you is, can you talk a bit about range anxiety, what that means, and if you actually think it's a valid concern?
I mean, it's definitely a valid concern, and it's something that a lot of electric vehicle owners face day in and day out. There was a report over the weekend that 1 in 5 EV owners in California, stopped driving an electric vehicle after their first purchase because of problem with range and charging. So it's definitely something that exists. And to boil it down super high level, what it means is that you have the fear of running out of charge, right? Due to the lack of infrastructure, due to your location, due to the things that impact range, such as weather, driving habits, you are in constant fear of your battery running out. And to, equate it to someone who doesn't drive an electric vehicle, it's that same angst or fear that you experience when your phone drops below 50%, right?
Yeah.
When you're like looking for a charger and you're like, I gotta plug it in. But now take that and compare it to driving a car, right? And the problem with that is that there's not a charger like on the wall. You actually have to go and find and sit and wait, So that's a super high level description of range anxiety.
You are based in Somerville, Massachusetts, but can you talk a little bit more about how you got the idea to start your company and also fill us in on what a mobile charging network means as opposed to, maybe the way that those of us who don't have any EV yet think of charging infrastructure as, pulling up to something that is kind of like a gas station, but for EVs, or we see chargers, at our grocery store or whatnot.
Got the idea while I was at Syracuse University and really, took Professor Peter Wilcoxon's class, environmental economics. And he came into class one day and he said, if you want to change the world, solve the problem of infrastructure for electric vehicles. And he said, if you're interested, meet with me after class. And I was the, only student to show up and meet with him and talk with him about EVs. Through doing this research on electric vehicles and seeing that they had a lot of limitations around range, a lot of limitations around the current infrastructure, set out to go design and build a portable charging station. And that is where the idea for SparkCharge began. And that really is what got us, off the ground.
Can you talk a little bit more about how that works?
Once we created the portable charging station, we said, okay, it's really good for these markets. We sold it to a lot of great companies. We worked with a lot of great OEMs and partners, but we realized that there was this segment in the market that was really not being addressed around convenience, right? Convenience of EV charging. There's, the roadside, there's fleet, but what about the person that's sitting on their couch at home? What about the person who's at work, the person who's grabbing a cup of coffee at Starbucks, the person at the mall? How can they charge their car and how can we make that experience better? We're going to be releasing the world's first truly on-demand EV charging network, which means that an electric vehicle owner with the push of a button can charge their car and have range delivered. And so now, if you're on an electric vehicle, right, the charging station can live on your phone. Oh. Now, instead of, it's just like the way society's going. So with Instacart, grocery store lives on my phone. Uber, my chauffeur lives on my phone. Grubhub, DoorDash, my pizza guy lives on my phone. And with ChargeUp, now you're going to be able to basically push a button on your phone and the charging station will live on your phone and you'll be able to receive range wherever you're at. You can be outside of a Starbucks grabbing a cup of coffee, push a button, and now your car is being charged. You could be downtown in the middle of Times Square, push a button, and now your car is being charged. You can be sitting on your couch and say, Alexa, charge my car. And now someone's showing up to charge your car.
And that really, I think, shifts the way that we think about infrastructure, how it's a little bit more fluid and how we can use technology that's available to us, like our phones, to help expand the use and uptake of EVs. I wanted to touch on something else. So we hear a lot in the media about the jobs potential of the clean energy transition and building out a lot of this infrastructure for EVs included. So I wanted to ask, do you think that the green energy transition is going to be as big of a benefit to workers as it's been touted in the media?
I do think it will be as big as it's being touted, and I think it's for good reason. When you think about any infrastructure project that's out there, when you think about the time, effort, and manpower needed to get it off the ground, it usually involves a lot of jobs, it involves a lot of energy, and I think that the clean tech infrastructure, the electric vehicle infrastructure that's going to need to be in place to be part of our energy transition, that's going to require a lot of manpower. And I think, even when you think about infrastructure that's still there, right, there's companies like Charger Health that are focused on, training people to service these charging stations, service this technology, right?
And so how do we get a SparkCharge in every major metro area? What kind of support, policy support, and investment support would it take for your company to grow and expand and be, a fixture of a lot of Americans' daily lives?
I think it's really simple. We're launching in 4 cities: Boston, Dallas, San Francisco, and LA. We're super excited about launching in those cities. And I think what we're going to see is the fact that EV owners will choose to have their car charged with a push of a button than going and sitting and waiting at a charging station in an empty parking lot. If we look at how society has developed, if you can make something more convenient, if you can make something more cost effective, and if you can increase the user experience, then you've just solved a really big problem. And we believe that we nail all 3 of those. We check off all 3 of those boxes when it comes to enabling this new way of EV charging.
I hope you come to DC soon. I know that I'd love to have that benefit here. That'd be awesome to have an EV and have charging at the tip of my fingers on my phone. But one of the other things that is going to be necessary for the United States to really address climate change is the broad uptake of electric vehicles by American consumers. And so car manufacturers are headed in this direction. I know states are starting to mandate the phase out of internal combustion engines, but still there's a little bit of that apprehension that you mentioned earlier. How would you sway a potential buyer of an electric vehicle to the benefits of EV ownership? I know that's kind of the magic pitch that a lot of us are looking for.
At first, I'd start by saying, when we talk about, the growth of electric vehicles and what can be done, right? I mean, consumers are excited about electric vehicles, number one, right? I also think that the Biden administration sees where the market is going and what our infrastructure needs will be. They understand it, and I think they want to be prepared to handle the impeding demand. But I also think that, stationary charging stations can't be everywhere, but mobile charging stations can, which is why I believe a mobile option needs to be a part of the conversation and the government's preparation. And when you do that, and when you make it part of that conversation, you make it part of that preparation, basically at the point of sale, right, when someone goes in to buy that electric vehicle, the charging station is literally there with them in their pocket. You can now basically, we like to say, remove the barriers to EV adoption, right? With mobile charging and why consumers are going to get excited about it, you can remove the where, when, and how out of EV charging. Where do I charge my car? Wherever you want. When do I charge my car? Whenever you want. How do I charge my car? Just push a button on your phone. That is a great consumer experience. And I think it'll actually help increase the number of electric vehicles being sold.
And it seems like it makes our lives easier, removes one step of having to drive somewhere to either charge your car or fill up your tank. And, I think about all the time I've spent in my life at a gas station, and those, 10 minutes add up or whatever it is. So yeah, I think that's great. Everyone wants to save time. Everyone wants convenience. I hope that we see more mobile charging soon. And I wanted to ask for our listeners and readers who live in the cities where you're going to expand, how can they find out more about you and maybe sign up and become a part of your network?
Absolutely. So network will go live at the end of the month here in those 4 cities. You can follow us on www.sparkcharge.io. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn as well. And then, if you want to charge up experience, you can download the app at the end of this month, and you can be, charging your car with the push of a button.
That's great. We'll include those links down below. So if you're living in these cities, make sure to check out Josh and his company. So Josh, before you go here, I wanted to ask about the equity component of charging. So as you told me before, there are areas across the country called charging deserts. So can you talk a bit more about them and how SparkCharge is working to solve some of these issues?
Absolutely. So when you look at where charging stations are being deployed now, typically they're in areas that are most affluent. They're in areas that where you might see a large concentration of electric vehicles, which means they're bigger and nicer areas in general.
Mhm.
When we look at, electric vehicle adoption and electric vehicle adoption for everyone, if we want to make electric vehicles a viable option for every American, then we need to make charging accessible for every American. If I live in an area that's a charging desert that doesn't have access to electric vehicle charging infrastructure, I now am barred from joining this clean tech, this green revolution. I can't even charge the car, right? And when we look at it, when you look at an ad for an electric vehicle, it shows two-car garage, clean cars parked side by side with, maybe a couple of power walls attached to it, right? But in reality, 80 to 90% of all Americans live in apartment complexes, condos, duplexes, and high rises. And so if you can't make charging accessible for those individuals, then you're really going to have a hard time getting 100% penetration across the United States for electric vehicle adoption. One of the things that we're super excited about with Charge Up and SparkCharge is the fact that now, regardless of where you live, regardless of your zip code, regardless of your living situation, as long as you have access to a phone, you can now download an app and actually have range delivered, which means now you don't need to worry about living in a charging desert. You don't need to worry about if your landlord is going to install or your apartment complex is going to allow you to install infrastructure. As long as you have access to a phone, you have access to a charging station. And we think that's really going to help accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles as well.
Yeah, that's a really important point. So thank you for clarifying. And I think it goes to show that even if the price of electric vehicles come down through rebates or whatnot, if you don't solve the problem of where folks can charge their cars, it doesn't so much matter. So that's really great work. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain this to us. This is really exciting. And I'm glad that this is where the future is going. It sounds cleaner, more convenient, and a lot less smog and exhaust out there.
And yeah, a lot less smog and exhaust. And, you really touched on it. It's really about giving EV owners the freedom and giving them freedom back to charge their car around their schedule. I think that's going to be the most exciting part, is really opening the door for massive EV adoption.